My name is Rich Brisson, and I am the head of sync and licensing at Cadence Music Group, and also a part of the music supervision team at Eggplant Music and Sound. I'm going to be moderating the panel for you today, focusing on Bria Mack Gets and the musical journey within that. So we're really going to be diving into how the music in the show really came together. It's a very funny show, 6 episodes now available on Crave TV. Highly recommend checking it out. It's brought to you by New Metric Media, who's the same production company who brought the likes of Letterkenny, Shorzy, Children Ruin Everything. So a very funny team bringing a very funny show. Yeah, and again, we're going to be diving into the musical journey and finding out really how it all came to be. So I think we'll start by introducing our panel and getting a sense of who's here, who they are, and what they did. And also what they do. Angelique, you want to go first?
Yeah, hi everyone. I'm Angelique Knights, creative producer of Bria Mack Gets. I work for New Metric Media. As Rich mentioned, we've done shows like Letterkenny, Shorzy, Children Ruin Everything. But Bria Mack is my baby. I'm super proud of the series. I worked alongside Sasha Lee Henry, who is our showrunner, creator, director of episodes. My co-producer on the series was Tamara Bird, as well as we also had Kelly Fife Marshall, who was another director. Mark Montefiore was our executive producer, as well as Tanya Thompson. So again, there was a huge producing team and creative team on the back end. But yeah, we're really excited about the series, and I'm excited to be here and meet all of you guys.
Hi everyone, it's nice to see you all. I'm Chris Wilson, Junior Music Supervisor at Racket Music, working alongside Everton on Bria Mack. We focused on the creative aspects of it and didn't really have to do too much of the paperwork and admin pieces, but I'm excited to talk to you more about how it all came together.
Hi everyone, my name is Nikhil Seetharam. I'm a music composer. Specifically, I composed the score for Bria Mack Gets. I work very closely with Angelique here on the score, and yeah, I'm excited to be here, excited to meet everyone as well.
Hi everyone, I'm Deanna Choi. I'm really happy to be here this morning. I'm actually new to the team of Bria Mack, but I'm also a film and TV composer. My partner and I, we formed Hive Mind Music, which is a collective of composers dedicated to uplifting the profile of Canadian composers worldwide. And I recently scored a few things for CBC and Grey, which is on Paramount+.
Great, thank you. Well, I think we should start at the beginning. Really find out, how the music on the show came to be. I always love hearing about how these shows in general just come to be. So, Angelique, I'd love to hear, exactly where this journey started.
Yeah, for sure. And it's a long journey. So I jumped onto the project about 2.5 years ago. Prior to me joining, Sasha Lee Henry and Mark Montefiore were in development maybe about for 3 years or so. So what had happened is Sasha created this amazing short called Bitches Love Brunch. Mark had seen it online and he was like, wow, this is crazy. I think Sasha was in Thailand at the time and they had connected, and Sasha was like, hey, if you think this is cool, look at what else I got. And so she had pitched the concepts of Bria Mack Gets. So you have like this 25-year-old black girl who's going through life with her inner voice manifested as a hype girl. And that was like the early days creative concept of the show. And so from there, they then pitched it to Bell Media, went into development. And then I joined the team and worked creatively in the development process. So, we're reading scripts and we're just kind of talking through characters. Tamara Bird had also joined us at this time, and Tanya Thompson was there as well. And then so right from the jump, Sasha had music in mind, right? Like our early day references for the show was like Broad City. But then when we started talking music, series like Atlanta and Insecure came up. And, it's hard to like envision, a show with its characters and the arc without thinking about the music. Like it's embedded in our culture. And so I know like right off of the jump, that was something that we spoke a lot about. And then Nikhil joined us.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about your process on how you came onto the project as the composer.
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting because so I'd worked with Angelique and New Metric Media on Children Knew Everything, and I'd written the score for the first 2 seasons. So I kind of had a bit of a leg up when I came to Bria Mack because I was already familiar with the team, but I'd never met Sasha, the creator, before. So when I had that interview process with her, we had a great conversation, and Andrew's on there as well, and she just said, "Listen, we have all these ideas. Why don't you go away and actually put down some ideas and come back?" So I created this playlist of, I think, like 14, 15 cues. Most of them were original, and I sent that over. And from there, we sort of had a baseline of what worked for the show. And quite a few of those cues ended up being a part of the score. Some of the main themes in the series come from that initial playlist that I put together. So that was kind of how I came about the show. And from there on, I mean, I read scripts, I got the episodes, and yeah, we kind of just hit the ground running at that point.
And one thing I'll say, because I know Nikhil's being like super humble right now, he floored us with those 14 tracks, because in early days of the series, like we had a script, but everybody is so kind of curious about the creative puzzle pieces coming together. So to have those like early concepts and to share them with Network, share them internally at New Metric Media, it kind of gave everybody like an idea of like what the show would be and the tone. And so, yeah.
Yeah, and when you're sharing it with that many people too, there's so many opportunities for revisions, for comments, for things to just go in a completely different direction. So yeah, that's very cool that you were able to kind of just like bring that. Was there inspiration that you were pulling from specifically?
I think the main inspiration was really just the conversation with Angelique and Sasha, which is the story of Bria Mack and who she is and what her experience is. So I think for me, approaching the score was very much blank slate, but it was very much still based on a conversation with the creators on what they feel this character is and what the music should sound like. So it was sort of me sort of shooting in the dark, and very fortunately some of it did work. But I think inspiration-wise, it really just is that conversation and just sort of locking in on what you think you can bring to the table as a composer. And of course, not everything can work, but when it does, it's great because it gives you then the confidence to approach the rest of the score, knowing what does work and also what doesn't as well.
Totally, yeah. You kind of get the feel and the tone, and then you just run with it.
Exactly.
Yeah, that's great. I love in this series too how there's so many departure fantasies, and there's so much room to play around with music and just creatively, like within the show. For those of you who haven't seen it, there's just this invisible hype girl that follows Bria around, Black Attack, and it's just sort of like the devil on the shoulder that is kind of like pushing her into situations. And there's just so many situations where the music just kind of like comes out of nowhere, and it's just very, very fun and upbeat, and yeah, it's just very, very cool. I'd love to just, kind of hear about the process too, about playing around with those scenes. Like, was there a lot of creative freedom to just sort of dive in to that? Was there, still needing to follow that lane?
Yeah, well, I think from the compositional side, there was a lot of freedom. I mean, if you've seen the show, you can go from an everyday situation to then being transported into this otherworldly scenario. So first and foremost, it had to be believable. It had to feel real. It had to feel dramatic, sometimes epic, sometimes emotional, which was sometimes very different from the comedy of the scene preceding it. So it was sort of exciting for me to experiment with that sort of jump from just, her having a conversation with someone to suddenly being in like medieval times, for example. Musically, definitely a lot of fun. I mean, I think the only thing is I had to pull back at certain moments because, you can go too far with those. You can make it feel like the show is about medieval times. So you have to sort of, well, at least I had to find a way to still ingrain the comedy underneath everything while still having sort of a dramatic overlay of instruments. So for me, it was a tremendous amount of fun. And I think, going back to that first conversation, I was told about these departure fantasies, but there's nothing quite like seeing it and then being completely inspired by it. Yeah,
it's a big part of the show, and it's very fun, and just kind of adds to the creativity and just the lightness and funness of the whole thing. The music really adds. So Chris, I'd love to hear about your process working with the music supervision team, about how when you came into the process, what your role on the show was, and really how yeah, you worked with the labels and the publishers, and yeah, just hear about your experience working on the show.
Yeah, for sure. Our experience was, like, for me and working on the show is really about like coming in and just fully focusing on the creative, not really having to worry too much about the admin and the paperwork side of it. So we were brought in very early enough to, once the show had the scripts were written and still going under the process of being revised, about wanting to at least be able to provide them with music that gave them a landscape of what it is that they were really trying to aim visually at. So we really just focused on trying to understand the show. So we had an initial meeting with Sasha to get a good description of like what the reference points were, what they were really aiming for in terms of wanting it to be Canadian music that was emergent talent, that really had a gritty mixtape feel, that showed that struggle and that life's of Bria, and really wanted to flesh that out in the music that Bria would be listening to, and then getting to meet with Nikhil and get an understanding of, from a composer standpoint, like what that would look like layer-wise, and using that as our reference points to start compiling music. And for us, like, when we get to just focus on the creative side of it, and just being able to pull as much music as we could possible. So we sent over extreme amounts of music batches for the production to be able to go through and understand if this was like where we were heading with the music was really in line with what the show was, and that was our like starting point. And then from there, really being able to zero in on points within each episode where we would be layering in those tracks, and trying to get into the specifics of it. There was layers of songs that were a little bit more difficult to find or understand when you have something that's really geared towards a lovers rock record or something that was Afro-Cuban. We had to then like try to dive deeper, and when you're looking at it being Canadian and being emergent talent, what are those areas that you can look for and find those tracks? So really leveraging and understanding who those players are within our city, and across Canada, and leaning on people like Lula Lounge and somebody like a Kirk Diamond, who is a Juno Award winner for that Lovers Rock record. And we really got an opportunity to really flex our muscles and really dive into the music that like we enjoy hearing, and also put someone on the map with such a great show that was written and created.
Yeah, and a music supervisor is such an integral part too in the process of working on a project, be it a film, a TV show, even an ad. And because there is, like you said, so much music that gets delivered that needs to be within the budget, be able to be cleared. So having a music supervisor come in early, especially to help budget, source, find that sound, it's such a big part of the process. So. Yeah, Deanna, I know you've had experiences, obviously accomplished composer working on films and TV and documentary. I'd love to hear your experiences about working with music supervisors and how that really plays in projects that you've worked on.
Absolutely. Just for a show of hands in the room, how many of you are filmmakers or producers or editors or have watched like the early rough cuts of a project where you're like, I don't know if I want anyone else to see this. I don't know if it's any good. Chances are some of those early takes have very little music in them, or you might have some temp that the editor throws in. And this is often a double-edged sword that music supervisors and composers and all other members of the post team have to contend with, because it's a question of, is this really what the tone and the direction that the showrunner or director wants to go in, or do we need to come up with something totally original? And depending on the situation, sometimes it's a paint by numbers. Nope, this is exactly the right fit and tone. Go with like a bossa nova groove here. We're gonna have a jazz feel over here, and we're gonna go full on like romantic classical over here. But in a case like Bria Mack, Nikhil, I think we were chatting earlier, and you were saying that there was no temp, or very little.
I think there was very little temp, and even when there was temp, thankfully Sasha, the creator, she wasn't too attached, which is very rare. I think you also know that experience, where you can sort of have that temp fever. Bless you. And sort of you have to find a way to recreate it without copying. But I found with Bria Mack especially, there was just more freedom. And if you could bring a better idea to the table, then they were open to that, which is great.
And that's so amazing. It seems like from the conversations of this team, bringing in everyone to the table early on was one of the best things that could have happened, because I certainly feel the difference depending on where I get brought on in a production, whether it's like, oh, they're in rough cut already, hey, can you compose some music, where a lot of decisions have already been made, as opposed to the early stages of a process where, hey, there's this scene that takes place at a party or at a club. What's this music in the background? Is it is it a sync placement that we're looking for? Or is it something original that then morphs into this other dimension that then ties in with some of the themes of the music, themes of the show, so that it can then start to articulate a whole new layer of storytelling? And I think that's what's so exciting about this integration. As I was watching the series, there are times where I was like, is that sync? Is that original? Like that, and that's what you want, right? You don't want to pull the audience out of a very critical, emotional moment thinking, oh, this is a song. It's actually the opposite in a way. You know when you've done a good job, when as an audience member, you're just fully engrossed in the story.
Fully immersed without having to double think.
Where you're not thinking about it.
Yeah, right.
And what you were saying about, it's actually, I can appreciate how challenging it is to do comedy, especially because comedy needs such a light touch, and it's a very fine line between, do you overcommit to an aesthetic like the medieval times thing, or like the Zen meditation track that you did, where you then again start to lose yourself in that world, as opposed to it's still layered in the world of Bria Mack. And what I started to notice after watching a few episodes was initially the music is catalyzed by Black Attack and the inner hype girl, and it follows whatever storyline Black Attack brings in. But then it starts to twist into this more heartfelt thing, which then you realize has been what Bria wants the whole time. And you wouldn't be able to do that if someone had just lobbed in a whole bunch of library music. You know, a lesser producer could have said, oh, these are pretty straightforward genres that we're playing with. We don't need to hire a composer or get a music supervisor to get something done to spec, or that feels like Brampton, or that feels like the GTA. But the fact that you did that gives it an emotional heart to the story.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. I mean, I think that's really storytelling as a composer. I think, you know, the importance of having a composer from the beginning, you get to tell that story, and even if an average audience member can't pick out certain themes, I still believe that people feel it, even if you're not sort of conscious about it. And I think that's truly where the magic lies, where you can walk away from a series feeling a certain way, even if you can't pick out what specifically happened musically. There's been an impact, and I think that's sort of what we do. We're almost like the hidden actor on screen, and that's really what music is, I think, in film and TV.
And really the viewer experience for us was so important off the top, like playing with the grounded reality of Bria, and then the heightened reality of our departure fantasies, having an imaginary hype girl, and then we also have in things like memes built in. The music was so key. Like I'm thinking, and this isn't a spoiler, but in 102, the back end of that episode, we have a departure fantasy, and you know, shit gets real in that departure fantasy, and we wanted to make sure that that licensed track we had there really speaks to essentially what Sasha had to say. And so I remember that track. We worked with Charmaine, who's a Juno Award-winning artist. I believe the track is called Bad Bitch Mentality, and it did exactly what we needed it to do, to tell the story in the way that Sasha intended to tell it. So yeah, it was great.
And that track was a licensed track, you had said,
It
correct?
was,
Yeah?
it was.
So what was the process of going through that? Because you need to be able to, like you said, find the right track to fit that tone. Was there a lot of songs that you guys had gone through, or was there, Chris, do you maybe want to speak to that?
I mean, like there was, in the original, wanting to like specifically get that song because it was just like, it really spoke to the moment, and getting more of a creative understanding of what that moment was, you know, not only just from reading the script, but being able to get the cues from Sasha allowed for us to be able to be like, okay, I think in this realm, these are the songs that could fit, and this one is really the one that we see, being able to drive it home, and then from there going on through to try to get it licensed, which we, you know, in this moment didn't have to really worry too much about, but like, you know, also being prepared for if that song, we aren't able to get it, what are the alternatives that we could potentially have forward? Because when you're playing around with the budget, some songs might fall out of that budget range, and you might not just be able to do it. So you now want to try to find those alternatives that you can kind of put into play. But knowing the importance and the value of it makes you want to really figure out, okay, well, how do we get this song? And what room do we have in the other tracks that we're selecting to be able to free up some budget to be able to put towards this song and make sure, because the moment is so crucial, you want that impact of that record to be felt. And you do also want, when the creative parts of it get so tied to the track and really love it, you don't want to disappoint either, because you know how much it means to them to have that record.
You want to make sure it's in budget. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. There, in episode 6, towards the end, there's a big moment with Vanessa Carlton, 1,000 Miles cover, where Bria Mack, Bria's life is really starting to come together. Things are going well with her job. Well, I won't ruin it for everybody. But I'd love to cue this scene up, just to give everyone a shot to see this moment here with this Vanessa Carlton song. If we could play the next clip. Oh, here we go.
27 minutes? Fuck it, I don't mind a nice walk. Let's get it.
Making my way downtown, walking fast, faces passing, they're all black. Future brightly ahead, making my way to where the laughs are loud. Oh, how I need you, oh, how I missed you, and I just can't wait to work with black folks by my side, so we can all share thoughts on the shy. And that's why I walk 1,000 miles to work with black people.
Damn right.
We can discuss topics like that, pink sauce and castor oil, and rest in peace, Nipsey. 'Cause so much is going on, but I know I belong. Talking with Kim about Tyler Perry. Oh, how I need you. Oh, how I missed you. And I just can't wait for us to talk about why black folks get called rude when shy. And that's why I walk 1,000 miles to work with black people.
My niggas for life.
So clearly we can't do a music panel on Bria Mack and not discuss this scene. So I'd love to hear how this came together, and really what the process was of when this song may have came up, and just really how the lyrics too may have came up. Do you want to speak a little bit to that?
Yeah, this scene was a key scene for the series and the show. So Sasha had scripted these lyrics. Like, this was the big dream, like plan A. We didn't have a plan B. So right from development, this was on the page. And so it was ambitious. I mean, there's so much about the show that's creatively ambitious, and you know, it's a testament to the team that we put together that we were able to execute it in this way. Like, I still watch it and crack up all the time. I'm like, ha, we did this, yay, it's great. But I just say all that to say that, yeah, Sasha wrote the lyrics, and that was all her. So I'll let you speak to
And-
Nikhil and how it came together.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, well, this is your cover of the song too, right?
Yes,
Correct?
that's right, yeah.
Yeah. What was the process like working with Malaika Henny Hamadi, who plays Bria? Because those are her vocals too, right?
Yeah, those are vocals. I mean, so I had written sort of a temp version, and the key thing for me was to honor the original song. I mean, if you're of a certain age, this is a banger, and you grew up with this. So to me, I wanted to maintain what that song was really about compositionally, but also just find like a little way to update it, to find a way to let the vocals breathe, and then just sort of bring in something newer. So it was once again the whole thing of, you can go too far and then you can get pulled back. So I think my first version of the instrumental for this was like just, to the wall, crazy with like full orchestra and everything. And then Sasha was like, well, I think we need to pull it back because it needs to be grounded. The scene, I hadn't seen the scene yet. I don't think it was even filmed yet, to be honest. But the scene is essentially Bria walking down the street, and it really needs to feel like it's about her and her journey. So we can't take away from that. So, I sort of stripped everything down to just piano, and then when I had the opportunity to go into the studio with our main actor, Malaika, I knew going into it that she is a singer, but I also knew that she hadn't had any studio recording experience. One half of my background is composition, the other half is production and working with artists. So for me to go in, I think I wanted to give her the confidence that even if she's never done this before, there's a way to sort of use that inner voice that, you sing in the shower, you sing with your friends. There's a way to still emote that beauty in the studio without getting too nervous. So I think, the biggest challenge, and she was great, but I think, it's not Malaika, the person singing, it's Bria Mack, the character singing. So I think it was finding that balance of her sounding like her, but also sort of meshing that with the character and how Bria Mack must have been feeling that day walking down the street. So I think that was the real experience, which was sort of finding that middle ground. And then once we had the vocals, I comped all the takes. I went back and I sort of did the version that you heard now. But it was also another thing of, let's make it not sound too recorded. Let's make it still sound natural. Let's make it sound like this character is singing it while walking down the street. It can't feel like she did go into a studio and record it. So it was, once again, a very fine line between how much editing and processing you do to the vocals, how much of it do you leave naturally. So this is what we ended up with.
Great. And it really showcases, too, how important a music supervisor is in the process, because if you were to shoot that, then try to clear it, and maybe wasn't in the budget, or just for whatever reason they say, no, we don't do covers, or whatever issue may come up, I mean, that's a big thing.
Yeah, definitely would have changed the game. And I think for us, like, knowing that scene was so important and coming in and having that track be kind of removed somewhat out of the budget, helped us to be able to find that room for everything else that we needed to do, but then also, like, depending on the usage, also give Nikhil the opportunity to be able to actually put that together so that we could actually have it be in it, which is the part, right? Like, you really do need this song. Like, there's no other way.
Yeah, there's no choice. Do you want to just speak to the process, too, of how you go about clearing a song like that? Like, what's involved?
Yeah, I mean, like, it's important to just really understand and recognize that there's two sides to a song. There's the masters, and there's the publishing. And when we speak to, like, the masters, it's like the recording, the actual recording of the song. And when you think of publishing, you're thinking of the intellectual property, like the lyrics. And both sides are clearing them is very much similar to it. The importance of, like, really being able to understand is that you want to ensure that you have all of the rights holders. Like, that's, like, the most important part. You want to ensure that you have all the rights holder and that you actually reach out to all of them, because even if it's just like somebody has 1% rights of it, that's 1% away from really copyright infringement. So you want to make sure that you have all of those individuals. And then from that standpoint, then what you're really, like, working towards is, like, trying to come to set, like, what is going to be the fees for that. And, like, typically you reach out to one side and come to an agreement on what those fees are going to be. And once you do that, you reach out to the other side and say, hey, this is what we've agreed on from the one side. And typically, you're hoping that that other side's going to agree to the fact that, you might have wanted it to be 2,500 or 5,000 on that side, and then the other's like, oh yeah, that's cool, we're good with it, and then you kind of set that, and that now both sides combined are what are going to be that licensing fee for that track. But there are those moments where they do counter, and then you go back to the other side, which is not going to be unhappy in the fact that they've countered. And then that's how you would settle it and be able to, and from that point, go into the actual paperwork of it and get it actually licensed so that you have it.
I like what you said. You're only 1% away from copyright infringement. So yeah, good music supervisors always going to be key. So Deanna, so outside looking in, like when I'm watching television or commercials, especially as someone who licenses music, I'm always giving critique and looking and saying like, oh, why did they pick that song, or how did that song come about, and always kind of wondering, like when you're seeing this Vanessa Carlton cover, is there anything as a composer for yourself that really stands out, or that comes up in that scene?
Well, I think Nikhil just mentioned, like, it is a touchstone for anyone who grew up in the, late 90s, early aughts. Like, we all have this, middle school memory, I think, associated with that song, for better or for worse. So cultural relevance is such a huge part of it. It's, whether it's location-based or time period, or a very specific thing like early adolescence, that has an implication for when you're watching it later. I mean, there's a reason why things like the Frasier or Friends, all these sitcom reboots are having a renaissance right now because of all the people who watched them 20 years ago. And I think for me, watching this, I really appreciate the fact that you had a cover flash mob, because the last time I saw that in a film was probably Hall & Oates' You Make My Dreams Come True in 500 Days of Summer. And in television's even more rare, like you maybe get Once More with Feeling in Buffy, or Subspace Rhapsody on Strange New Worlds. But the fact is that, I come from a background in theater where you're already having another level of suspending your disbelief that people will break out into song and dance, and that's totally rational. But I think you've built up a world where that's almost expected now, because you've had all these departures from reality. So it's not such a huge extrapolation to then layer this on top, because as the audience, we understand that she's still walking to work, and that this is just another way of telling that story of her walk to work. And figuring out what that balance of bringing in the other characters, and how much of that is in Bria's imagination versus what she wants for the future, and how to tell that story. I think this is a great way of doing that. They say in theater, when words fail, an actor starts singing, and when music runs out of the emotions, then people start dancing. And I think having the playfulness to explore that and fully commit to that, you've earned that payoff by this point in the season with all the other departures and flights of fancy that you've done so far.
Yeah, I like that. That's very true. I think for someone watching the series for the first time, even though it's not commonplace in the series to break out a song and dance, it does feel earned in a weird way. It feels like it doesn't actually come out of nowhere. So yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Cool. Any thoughts for season 2?
Ooh-wee. I think the creative team is just so excited to go on that adventure and make a season 2. I mean, the series dropped on Crave this month, so it's still very early days, but yeah, we're ready to go as soon as they tell us.
Would love to see it. Okay, I guess we'll open the floor up to some questions. Click, you have a question?
Well, I'm curious if you had the song already finished for publishing, to hear what was being done versus here's just an idea and this is what we want to do, and then you went back in and actually did it. Do you know what I'm saying? I'm wondering what came first, chicken or the egg?
Yeah, so like for this, because we came in creatively, we didn't have to do too much of that, like the paperwork or trying to figure out it. But the conversations had already begun in terms of what it is that we would like to use the song for, and then that was the opportunity that gave Nikhil to do it. So that was really like the flow and the process of it, at least when we got into when that song was chosen and knowing that that's what we wanted to do. But that conversation had begun already prior to it, and that's the ability to kind of have that happen.
Yeah, I think the lyrics were set prior, but the instrumental or the cover wasn't done yet. So I think there must have been some idea of what it was going to turn out into. So it wasn't like, I think, going in with nothing at all. But
Exactly.
But yeah, the track hadn't been done. Nothing had been recorded. I think it was more. I believe so.
Yeah. No, I'm a pitch to the publisher.
Yeah, just to echo everything they said, yeah, lyrics were done, but it gave us a ballpark, like a dollar figure, to know that it was doable.
Hi there, right over here. I have a producer question. How do I be a good producer and budget for some of these scenarios in terms of the song that is a sound-alike, or like we just saw right now, a song that is has some creative license to it? What are some of the scenarios like that? And here's the scary question: how much does it cost, so that I can give you a good budget to work with? You know, given the challenges.
It does. It all depends on the artist and then also who's involved in it. I mean, I think a good starting point is to kind of think about what your overall budget is for what you have, and then being able to kind of look at the different parts that are going to be able to play out for you to be able to produce that TV show or that film. Typically, we kind of, music isn't the budget that you want to work with. If you have the ability to have more room, it gives you the flexibility as to the songs that you could actually look for and find. But if your budget's not big and you, then you're going to have to really grind out what that could possibly be, and that changes just who you're reaching out to musically. So if you want to go for someone or something that's really in the stratosphere of an artist, let's just throw someone that we know, like a Drake, your chances are you're going to be spending a lot of money for probably one of those songs. And so you would have to have a really big budget to be able to actually afford for that. But if you know that your overall budget is something smaller, you want to then be able to really distribute that and the understanding of the songs. I try to remember or recall how much it was, but I'll get back to you on it. Well, you're looking at something of that $8,000 to $10,000 range. Mm-hmm.
Hi. Oh, sorry. It's my turn? Okay, I'm too Canadian. Pleasure. Thank you guys for coming today. I'm very curious about the working relationship with the network, because it seems like there's a renaissance happening with content with Robinhood. So I wanted to get more of a deeper dive of your relationship with Crave, with the music and the creative for the show. And if this new renaissance is because Canadian programming wants to take more liberties to give minorities a chance that they haven't been presented with prior.
That's a fantastic question. And so we worked really, really closely with Network, right? They're our partners right from day one, because one, we're in development with them. Two, they're greenlighting the series. And then three, once we're in production, they're giving notes, they're watching our dailies, right through the post process, we're getting notes that way as well too. So I will say that we had a very supportive partner that was rooting for us from the beginning, right? And I know that isn't always the case, right? And again, I'll speak from my lens. I had a past life working at Network for a really long time before I jumped into the producer seat creatively. So I had a lens of the challenges that they could have internally when they are advocating for shows that maybe is far away from their own POV, right? Because, we have a lot of work to do here in Canada when it comes to storytelling, the types of stories that are being funded, where the financing comes from, who are the stakeholders, who's greenlighting things. There's just a lot of work to be done in that space. And so I think that when Bria came about, we all fought really hard for it, both on the producer side, the creative side, and then the network side, because everybody knew how important not only this show was, but again, having a creator, storyteller, Sasha Lee Henry, having her voice out there, because like we want to make more Bria Macks. Like there's no reason why we can't have more Canadians making comedies from this POV. And so I kind of just say all that to say that in this case, I couldn't ask for a better partner. Like, we really did it as a team. But I know that's not always the case, and we just have to keep pitching. One, you have to keep pitching, keep asking lots of questions, because we need to make more shows. Is that answered? No.
Hi, my name is Angela. I'm over here. Thank you. As a Nigerian Canadian, thank you so much for this work, because you see, it's great to see our lives represented. However, as a Nigerian Canadian, I also want to follow in your footsteps in terms of showing Africans in diaspora and our lives here, because raising children here and having to deal with identity crisis, it's important for them to see themselves as first generation, second generation immigrants to Canada. So thank you so much. Now for my question, and please don't take this the wrong way. So this is a disclaimer. For a song that was particularly, focused on working with Black people, why did you choose a song by a white artist? And what was I would like to understand the creative choice behind that, in terms of, were you trying to appeal to a wider audience by using a song that is known across boards, so maybe give it a chance to cross over? Or was it particularly because, what was the particular reason? Because I would have expected maybe like a hip hop song, or like a neo soul or something. So what was the reason behind the choice of song in terms of having to, do a cover on that particular song? It was great, by the way. Just wanted to find out what the creative decision was about.
For sure, and I'll take a stab at it. Our creator, showrunner, we wanted to adhere to what spoke best to the story. So for Sasha, that song resonated in a way that we were able to tell Bria's story in its truest form. I think it does us a bit of a disservice to start to categorize our music tastes and choices based on perception. I think that we want to adhere to the essence of the character, and that song really did it. And it was funny, like we watch it and we laugh. And Sasha had her lyrics that, again, really spoke to how the character was feeling at that moment, and it broke all of the rules. So, I think it all goes back to story and character and adhering to like the tone and the comedy of the show. We don't want to like proactively put up borders or limitations to the creativity, because then when we're out, like kind of when we look at it on the other end, we're like, ooh, is this really what the character's trying to say? So if that answers your question at all, I would always just say we're adhering to just telling the story in its truest form.
I feel like that's like, when we got the scripts and got to read through it and got to the point of that moment, it kind of really understood a lot of like Bria's personality. And for us, it was like, okay, we get a sense of who this individual is. Let's pull all of the songs that fit within the range of what that person's personality would be. And that's how you get that plethora of like, okay, well, I would have been in school, high school, going into university, my classmates would have been listening to this, but also I would be listening to this music, and that's where we're pulling artists that do sit within that hip hop or that boom bap range that we know that, would have been Bria's hype music to her personality, and that's how you get that other layer. So it's wanting a complete picture of the individual and not just trying to take one part of it, and that's kind of how it all kind of came together in that.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with that, and I also think just from a purely musical standpoint, when you deal with melody and harmony, quite often that has nothing to do with the background of the person at times. And I think, the fact that this was sort of ingrained into the script from day one, this cover, I think it really speaks to the creator, Sasha's background as well. And it also speaks to the melody of the song that really resonated with her as she grew up. And, for me to even hear that, this is from a white artist, it almost surprised me for a second, because it didn't register with me. All I think about is the sort of craft underneath. But I think I agree with you, Chris. I think we wanted to show Bria's full personality and not just one segment of it. And I think that comes through with all of the musical choices throughout the series.
I have a question. Do you have any advice to help inspire or guide a composer to achieve your creative vision? Like, where would you source some music samples or material rather than, sitting and watching like tons of movies and going on YouTube? Is there any specific website or resource that you would turn to find something to hand to your team and be like, I want something along these lines?
I mean, I think in my experience working with directors and showrunners, quite often the editors involved are the ones who are sourcing this music and are sourcing the temp music. I think it's very subjective, but it also does stem from the conversation between an editor and a director on the overall vision of music for the series or film. And then from what I believe, the editor goes away or goes to their sort of library of music and will choose things. Well, once again, I can't speak to an editor's experience, but everything I've ever received temp music-wise for direction has really come from the edit and has been something agreed upon by the director and the editor. But whether or not it's accurate to what will finally end up being in the series or film, at least it's a guideline. And I'm not quite certain if there's a specific resource. Deanna, I don't know if you know of anything for someone to pull music from specifically.
I think the best piece of advice I got when I was starting out, so I was working as a Starbucks barista and as a hostess, and I went to a mentor of mine. I was like, I feel like I'm wasting my time right now. I should be going out working on shows and putting out music. And she said, no, you're experiencing life right now, and art is a reflection of life. So live life, and the rest will follow. And I think if you go seek out music, go to shows, go to concerts, go see live bands, and feel inspired by that, that will influence you much more than a website. Like you can go on Spotify and search tons of things, but that's a very curated algorithm that someone else has decided on your behalf. You're much more creative than Spotify. So
Yeah, I just don't want to hand it all over to my editor and just be like, here, find me some samples. I want to, collaborate
Right.
and be like,
Yeah.
I want something kind of like this, you know what I mean? And then go hand that to the composer.
Certainly being specific in your musical references, I think. It's great to watch other content that's out there, or again, see shows and find artists whose work you like. Sometimes I'll even be inspired by, let's say I'm walking through a tunnel and like there's rain dropping somewhere on a puddle and it's creating this weird echo, and I'll sample that. Sometimes I find it's more effective to talk about emotion or character development than just saying this is the exact type of music that I want in this moment. So that's the other part about working with a composer, is that you don't have to necessarily give them a musical reference. You can give them a touchstone of storytelling from another domain.
Absolutely.
That's even more effective.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it also is very crucial for a director to be involved in the music process from day one, whether it's specifically finding tracks to give to the editor. It could just also be, as you said, a story beat, or it could be an overall direction. But I find that the initial involvement is very crucial, because then the language has been established, and then when you're brought on as a composer, the director already has an idea of the musical direction, or whether to stay away from whatever they had initially chosen. But as you said, you can be inspired anywhere, to be honest. It doesn't have to be temp music. It could just be even a conversation. Just like Bria Mack, just that first initial conversation was enough to spark ideas for me, and I hadn't heard anything yet. I hadn't seen anything yet. So I think that inspiration can come from anywhere. But just my advice is, just definitely be as close to the musical choices as possible from the very beginning.
And if you're already working with a composer and you like their work and you think it's in the right feel for the show, you can always ask them if they have anything in their back catalog or their
right.
B-sides, essentially, of stuff that they've written for other projects that didn't make it into a show that you could, potentially use to temp in or even license.
Yeah, I was gonna say, the more you can be close to the project in terms of like the creative and like what you envision and see outside of even like the temp music is like super helpful, because that's like a great starting point for us to be able to really understand what it is, the personalities, the layers of, and the intricacies of what the characters are going to be, and the scenes that are going to be delivered. And then, yeah, like an editor will have in place things that are going to be temp and come to us and be like, okay, well, this is what we have. And we'll be like, well, that's going to cost too much compared to the budget. So we find alternatives to that. But that helps, you know, for us to be able to know that there's something already in place, that you kind of have a sense of what would work in this space, and we can then work within the confines to find other elements that would work that, you know, could cost, come in at a cost that actually fits the budget. But I think the best and the opportunities for us to work is like when you can really describe the intricacies of the individuals and the characters that are going to be playing. And like for us, our inspiration really comes from going to multiple different things, like, you know, going to a live show, listening to music while you're doing activities, like really understanding the things that are going to be, like the music is being overlaid or being played through the actions of those characters. So the more you can be in those moments and having those actions be background, having music play, it gives you a sense of like, oh, this really actually does work for me washing the dishes. Or if I was, you know, gonna go driving in my car, like what would you, you know, just to kind of get that visual sense of what that would look like.
That's great. Well, I'm told we're out of time, but thank you very much, everybody, for participating today. I'd just like to say thank you to Reelworld and also to Music Publishers Canada for sponsoring the panel. And of course, you all for having us out. That was really great. Yeah, thank you again.
This is awesome.
Thank you,
Thanks.
everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.